Bruce Smith AC4G, who's going to talk to us about some of his ham radio experiences. And Bruce has been a ham since the 1980s. He has a degree in electrical engineering and a master's in computer engineering. And he spent some time for his work in the Marshall Islands in the South Pacific and was fortunate enough to do some ham radio operations from that location for several years. And I think Bruce is going to have a very interesting story to tell us about that. And Bruce is currently retired, living in Tennessee, and he's maintaining the family farm in Taft, Tennessee, which keeps him busy with soybeans, corn, cotton, and new towers. Okay, all yours, Bruce.
All righty. So what I'm going to talk about is how I operated from the Marshall Islands as Victor 73 Charlie Whiskey. Maybe you were able to work me back then, but what I'm going to start off with is that the Marshall Islands consist of several atolls. Kwajalein Atoll is one of the atolls of the many atolls that make up the Marshall Islands. And each atoll has its own set of islands. So with Kwajalein Atoll, the main island is Kwajalein Island. And going from there, just kind of around the circle, you have the next island up is Ebi. Ebi has about 10,000, at that time when I was there, had about 10,000 people. Average age was like 13 years old. You can imagine why. And Ebi was a little bit smaller than Kwajalein Island. And we'll get into the size here just in a few minutes. The next island up was Mek. Mek, we did a lot of testing, had test equipment there. Third island, Inubur, is kind of like a third world country. I'll show a picture of that soon. And you go on up to the far north side of the atoll, and the island is Roy Namur. Perhaps you remember some of the operators like Victor 73 GT, George Talbot, Victor 73 NS, Neil Schwindel, I believe is his name. They both lived up there. And I actually was a resident of Kwajalein and of Kwajalein Island and lived on Kwajalein. And as you can see there, my travels was from like 1993 to 2002. A lot of people, when they're going on a de-expedition, it's for what, a week, 10 days, might happen to be 3 years. And I just wanted to throw in this, not because I was arrested or a criminal, but because I actually got a job there. So we'll look at that here just in a few seconds. What I wanted to briefly talk about this evening is how I organized the trip, why I organized the trip, what's the significance of Kwajalein Island, a little bit of the culture. Typically when I do these briefings, the wives always tell me, hey, I enjoyed your culture aspect of it. I didn't care about the ham radio side of it. And we're also going to talk about the ham radio side of it because that's probably what your main interest is. So I had a couple of friends that were out there. Victor 73 Charlie, Ken Wells, he operated for several years from Kwajalein. And he talked to me and said, hey, Bruce, will you become my QSL manager? And I said, certainly. So I became his QSL manager, and he kept trying to get me to come out there. You need to come out there. You can bring your family out here. And I had another friend who operated or who actually moved out there. He was from Huntsville, and he was on a temporary duty there for a couple of years and took his family. So, with all that and being a DXer, if you're a DXer, you always want to be on the other side of the pileup. So I was trying to figure out a way to get somewhere, and this was my opportunity. So I found a way to make it happen. And the way it was I had to get a job there. I had to spend at least 2 years, sign up for 2 years to get a job there. So hence why I was not staying there for 10 days or so. That was one of the options, though. You can be sponsored to come out there, like K7ZZ from Oregon, Tom Meyer, who's at Silent Key now. he went out there and visited a V73UX. He was sponsored for like 10 days. So you're either a sponsor, you're on temporary duty, or you're a resident. So my sponsor being Dave Fortin, V73UX, he filled me in on everything I needed to know, what I needed to do to get a license, etc., where I could operate from the club station or your quarters or both, and bring your equipment, that kind of thing. So I did that, got the job, moved the whole family out there, sight unseen, and never been there, and attended the first club meeting. And I wanted to meet all the members there, and I wanted to kind of figure out who was operating when. So I got my license. They gave me a key, and I kept watching when people and talking to the operators that were there when they were operating, and it come to find out that if there were sideband contests going on, probably not a chance. But if it was a CW contest, you could have the shack all to yourself with all the equipment, all the antennas. So it was lucky for me that I was able to operate CW, and that's where I tried to spend a lot of focus. But we'll look at the statistics here just in a few minutes. And it's also important to stay in contact when you leave, because you might want to go back out, visit the island, and operate again. So my objectives were just to primarily, I had a job, so I had to work. That was my career. But I wanted it to be like a vacation, like the expedition. But I wanted to operate on all the bands, 6 meters all the way through 160, including the ORCs. I brought my satellites set up out there. I was at that time big into Oscar 10 and Oscar 13 satellite. Actually, Oscar 13, I think, had already burned up, but Oscar 10 was still around. And I wanted to be able to get some, personal satisfaction and some recognition that, hey, in case I wanted to go on a future G expedition with someone, that they would see that, hey, I was capable of doing that. So the question is how much time could I spend on the air? Where is Kwajalein Atoll? It's 8 degrees north of the equator, and it's almost equidistant, as you can see, 2,200 miles from Hawaii, from Australia, from Japan. We're kind of in that little circle there. There's the little road sign map that you see, and it shows 7,080 miles from Huntsville. Essentially, I live just north of Huntsville, Alabama, in Tennessee, but it's essentially 7,000 miles away. You go somewhere you've never been to stay 2 years. That was a big risk and kind of gutsy, I guess, but I wanted to operate. So we flew in, and my wife looked at me when we see this island, and they say, we're coming in to Kwajalein Atoll. And we looked at each other like, what have you done? What have you got us into? Kwajalein is a J-shaped island, and we're looking from north to south in this picture. It's 2.5 miles long. You can see the runway. The runway is about 6,500 feet long. So kind of do the math there, and it's 2.5 miles long, a half a mile wide, and it's on the rim of a volcano. An atoll is a ring-shaped island formed from a volcano or some coral, and this happens to be one of the islands that sits on the Kwajalein Atoll, as I mentioned earlier. Or yes. So how do we get there? We flew from Atlanta to Honolulu on a DC-10, 10 hours. But when we got to Honolulu, we had to transfer over to Hickam. We stayed overnight, got up the next morning real early. Best I remember, it was like 4 in the morning. And we got on a 141 cargo plane. Of course, we got in the jump seats, and we weren't the only cargo. I mean, they had food and all kinds of stuff. And we lined the windows with some other passengers that had been maybe CONUS or vacationing in Hawaii. And so we flew 5 hours from Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii to Kwajalein. But in order to get there, you have to have an entry-exit authorization. It has to be approved, or they kind of keep you there in in a kind of a holding area until you can prove that you're supposed to be there. The easiest thing to do is to have it in hand, which I had. And the airport supports, we've had a C5. The C-117s are a little bit smaller than a C-141, and they haul cargo in periodically. And the commercial flights were Continental Airlines at that time. I'm not sure what it is now, but there were only a few flights that came in. But we could take flights from Kwajalein and go to Kosovo, Guam, other places to operate, which I had planned to do. The Kwajalein is actually a community. It's actually a missile test range managed by the U.S. Army, but we have civilians, contractors that live on Kwaj. I mean, there's radar engineers, safety engineers, double E's, MEs. Then you have the budget people and the contractor team and the FFRDC, the Federally Funded Research Development Center. At that time, it was MIT Lincoln Labs out of Burlington, Mass. And of course, you have stores and little restaurants, and you've got a doctor, teachers, and other people that make up a city. But the mayor of Kwajalein is an Army colonel. So you got to do what he says. What is the significance of Kwaj? It's a U.S. missile testing facility out in the Pacific. And you see there in the picture, reentry vehicles coming into the lagoon. Usually they do that later on in the evening, in the afternoon, so you can see. It's kind of spectacular to see these things coming in at night, and all of a sudden you see these entry vehicles coming in, hitting the lagoon. Range headquarters was actually built in 1960, but it's been modernized. That's the building you see there. It's the actual Mission Control Center. That's where I worked. At the time, I was a flight safety engineer, doing some analysis on doing collision avoidance, making sure we didn't hit the space station and any other satellites, and making sure that we had the note Mars and the NOTAMs out. So that's the notice to airmen and notice to mariners, and letting them know that we were having a test coming up. The work day there was Tuesday through Saturday. And I should have pointed this out on the picture before of Kwajalein, the map. And we were located across the date line. So when it's Tuesday for our work day, back in Huntsville, it was actually Monday. So the Monday through Friday in Conus was Tuesday through Saturday on Kwaj. And we got our holiday on, of course, Sunday, and Monday was our Saturday, our day off. Lunch every day of the weekday was from 12 to 1. Everybody got off at the same time. The school teachers, the students, the workers, everybody went to eat and did their own thing. And it made it a little bit closer knit for the family. We enjoyed that. What is there to do on Kwajalein? Well, as you probably know, there was a World War II battle of Kwajalein. A lot of Japanese and Americans that were killed. And there's mass graves there. And once a year, Japanese actually family members come to visit the graves. There's also a lot of bunkers around the various islands, Japanese bunkers that you can visit. Even on Kwaj, you see the picture there on the top left. Another thing you can do, visit the turtle pond. That's kind of neat for the children. Another place to visit is the dumping ground. We call it the shark pit. You can pick up a lot of glass there, but most every time I've been there, there's always sharks hovering there. And I asked the question, why? And they said years ago, the restaurants used to dump all of their food there, and all the sharks would come up and eat from the pit there. So it's most of the time that you go there, you'll see a shark, even though they don't dump the food there now. You see all that rusty stuff, a lot of tanks, a lot of jeeps, and things like that during the war they dumped off in that area. Another thing to do is dive. A lot of people go out there, and if they don't already have their uh, diving permit, then they'll take it out there, take classes, and they get certified to dive. And the lagoon is like 150 to 250 feet deep. You can see wrecked ships. You can see aircraft down there from the war. Some of my friends have seen sake bottles and that kind of thing. And of course, you'll see the marine wildlife. One of the things I did a lot of is I enjoyed snorkeling with the family in these Japanese pools. What these pools were was when they were making the roads on Kwajalein, they would dig the coral here and they would leave these pools, but the coral, they would, since they didn't ship in gravel or anything, they would make the roads out of this coral. So that was kind of interesting. And the pools are 10 to 25 feet deep, and you'll find all kinds of things that during high tide that'll come in and bring in marine life. And when it goes to low tide, then those marine life will become trapped. So you kind of have to watch and make sure you're not in there with a shark. Most of the time, I've seen sharks in there, but they've been small sharks. What else is there to do? There's Emon Beach. That's the family beach. Swings and volleyball nets and things like that. Saturdays, that's full. They have people that like to picnic there. Of course, they have the chapel, the cultural center, the ball fields. You can rent sailboats. You can rent motorboats to go out and fish from the small boat marina. So it's you get certified to take the boats out, but once you do that, you can take those out just anytime. You actually rent them, but the rental fee is at that time was very cheap. Here's the third island I was talking about, Inubur. No electricity. Most of these rooms are like plywood, and there's no electricity. So I mean, they turn in at dusk and they rise with the sunshine. And the average age there on that island was 17 years old. People, the Marshallese people don't live on Quad. It's only Americans. So the Marshallese live on these, mainly it's on Ebi and Inubur, and some of these few other islands that are about and around the atoll. The transportation is bicycle. There are a few military vehicles like small pickup trucks and things like that. That's for the DOD workers and contractors to accomplish their mission there. But on the roads in the morning, it's fun, kind of odd. Around 7:30, you see children and family people, some going to work, some going to school, riding these bicycles. You see these high handlebars there. And to the left, I don't know if you can see that, but that's at the marina. There's tons, loads, hundreds of bicycles there that people park. They either take the catamaran up to Mech, or they go to the airport and catch a plane to go to Roy Namur, which is about 90 miles north of Kwajalein. They do that every day, morning and evening. But Kwajalein is one of the most corrosive places on earth. So if you take a new bicycle like we did, within a year, it's starting to rust. In a year and a half, it's almost rusted in two. So you can imagine what it would do, the saltwater atmosphere can do to the, well, not aluminum antennas, it'll corrode aluminum, but any kind of steel. So let's get to the ham part of this. On the top left, you see the CARC. That's the Kwajalein Amateur Radio Club, and how close it is to the beach. Many times when I've operated 160 meters, I would run radios out to the water. only thing about that is when the tide comes in the morning times, that I never could imagine how powerful a tide can be. But there's wires tangled up and wadded up in debris and covered up. It's just amazing what it can do. But it does help to get out. But this is a picture taken at sunrise. You can see the TH7 in the above the palm trees there, and on the bottom left side you see the ham shack. I've got some better pictures of this here just shortly, but in the early mornings, it's fantastic propagation to Europe, and when even when we have propagation to stateside, the signals seem to be strong, and obviously around sunrise and sunset. So what are the takeoff angles? I mentioned Quad is a J-shaped, and I mentioned E-by there. It's a violation to walk on the low tide from quads to reef. I mean to E-by via the reef. When people enter the reef, they get picked up by our security, and they get detained and get taken back to E-by. So it's, you know, they're serious about the security aspect of it. But North America is sort of toward the northeast there, as you can see. South America in that direction pointed there, and Japan kind of the northwest, and Australia. So being in the mid-Pacific, you've got some where the shack is there, you've got some good angles, clear takeoff angles. So the antenna farm here, I'll begin with the TH7DXX because it's one of the taller fixtures there. Then we have the high at 40. I tell you what, that was a killer antenna. You could point it anywhere with just 100 watts and make a contact. And of course, we were operational on 6 meters. We had a log periodic to cover the wart bands, and we had all. And then for we had a dipole up for 80 meters. As you can see, it was only up 35 feet per. But during contest, we'd take advantage of either the telephone pole for the TH7, or we'd go to one of these palm trees and hang up an inverted L for 160 and 80 meters. In the bottom there, you see an 80-foot aluminum tower. We were able to get our hands on that, but the whole time I was there, we were not able to put it up. So what you see there is the way it was when I operated. Little different pictures, different angles of the various antennas. Not a whole lot to say there. We did have a 2-meter repeater that we would talk to people around the atoll, around the Kwajalein Island at night, figuring out what they were going to do on the weekend, and just regular chatter. Sometimes when someone would take a boat out to the lagoon and go deep sea fishing or fish in the lagoon, we would talk to them on the 2-meter repeater. Here's the actual CARC Kwajalein Amateur Radio Club Station, a little cinder block building with air conditioning. And as you can see, it's not too far from the water. Here's me when I was there. I had a laptop, but most of the time I did not have my laptop with me. So I did a lot of paper logging when I would go to work, or when I would come get off from work and stop by the shack if nobody was operating, and I would try to make a few contacts. On the bottom right, you would see my family there. Behind them is the 2-meter repeater. And they didn't come to see me much at the shack unless they were bringing me food, because they knew when I was in a contest that I was doing serious business. And they were nice enough to bring me food and drink, though. That was great. 2 operating positions in the amateur radio club station. On the left is the Yaesu 747. It had a 500-watt solid-state amplifier. And that's what I used on 160 because the primary operating position on the right was an ICOM 761. And there was an issue with the Ameritron AL 1500 when I was there. I never was able to use it. I believe what happened was the grid current we did not have a protection circuit in there, and it got a tube or two, or actually a tube before I got there on site. So I used primarily when I was in a contest the station on the right, but during a 160 meter contest, I would go to the left because I could put out a little bit more power. The bottom right, you see the amateur radio station regulations. You can't read what it says, but they've got those posted. Inside the shack, a switch box to the left there under the fern flower. And we got some more pictures of inside the shack here just in a few minutes. At my living quarters, I brought my satellite stations, like I said. And I also brought an R7000 HF vertical. I knew there was not a whole lot of room in the quarters to put much up. And the satellite station, actually, with two Yagis there, is sort of large, but I was able to get by with it. And this is the typical type of cinder block building that the government DOD workers would stay in. Now, if you were a contractor there, they would put you in new housing on the north end of the island. And it didn't bother me a bit. A lot of people said they would rather be in some of these cinder block buildings in case we had some high winds or hurricanes. But while the time I was there, I never saw a hurricane at all, which I'm thankful for. Inside the living quarters, you can see my station on the left, and on the right, the satellite station and HF station, and a map there. And sometimes I would entertain visitors, and you can see the old monitor for the computer, the huge monitor, different from what we have nowadays. Okay, so as a team, the operators would get together during the major contest, sideband contest, that is, and we'd plan this out, and we would try to do what we could in the sideband contest. Here we were operating the 1999 CQ Worldwide sideband contest, and you've got several of the all of these guys were stateside at one time, but some of the calls you might recognize now are maybe WW2AVG was Dave Fortin of V73UX, and V73AT was Tim McLaughlin. He lives in Colorado Springs, and his call is N2PC, but he was a big 6 meter buff back at that time. So for that contest, we made almost 4 million points and almost 3,300 Qs. Well, in 2000, we made we were approaching 5,000 contacts, and our score was 6 million points. In VK3 Echo Mike Mike, if you're a contester, which many of you I know you are, they beat us by 31 QSOs that year and set a record. So we were that close in setting a record. On the bottom right is Dave Fortin working with Sam Gorham, V73 Alpha. Sam was one of the oldest hams still living out there at the time. He'd been there for years on end. On the left is Tom Meyer, V73ZZ or K7ZZ. In the 1999 ARRL 10 meter contest, I operated and I placed 7th place in the world, almost 2,000 Qs, but operated with that 761 you saw there on the right side of the shack and 100 watts using the TH7DXX. And I was low power, mixed mode, and I was tickled to play 7th place in the world. In the CQ Worldwide contest in 1999, I operated again all band low power. And of course, if you're a contester in the Marshall Islands, you're going to probably win because you're the only one operating. And I was lucky that, or glad that I won zone 31, which I thought was pretty neat. But I made 2 million points that time, 2,300 Qs using all those antennas that you see previously and see listed. So I was a happy camper for that contest. And then in this 160-meter contest in 2000, I operated using that 747, like I mentioned, in the 500-watt amp. And in 2000, I had 249 Qs and about 112,000 points. In 2001, didn't do as quite as well. And it's all you might know, it's like stateside here. Sometimes you just don't have the propagation and it's just not there. That's what I've experienced here. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not, but I was still tickled to be able to operate. That's where I really got my kickoff from 160 meters. Here's my son. He's sitting on this aluminum tower, and we're working on ground support, helping Dave. I got a picture showing him here in a few minutes, but if you'll see in the background, there is a little security truck that goes around. They're all constantly patrolling, seeing what we were doing, making sure that we're okay. But I'm glad that we have had the security that we did have. There's Dave taking a break. He's talking to my wife, getting his breath, getting ready to climb back up and work on some more antennas. One thing about the winds out there, there's always a wind, and it just really works on the ring gears in these in the rotors. And we have to buy extra parts for the rotors because of all of the back and forth, day in, day out, and night. This happens to be a picture of where I was standing at my living quarters. I was just showing you how far it is that my quarters is from the beach, and it's not too far away. So with that R7000 vertical, I used it from time to time. Here's Dave, B73UX. He's up on the tower on the left, and he's working to replace some of those climbing steps. His dad had a hardware store in Massachusetts, where he's from, and he would periodically send boxes of these steps out there. They would rust almost in two. So you can see Dave cutting the steps, what's left of them, with a hacksaw, and he's rescrewing new galvanized steps in there so we can continue to work on the antennas and do the maintenance that we need. Here is the official Victor 73 KX6 Euro. For some of you that might know, might not know, KX6, King X-Ray 6, used to be the prefix for the Kwajalein Islands or the Marshall Islands. And they since then changed it to Victor 73. On the left is the QSL card for the club station V73AX. Here's some of my QSL cards. And I just wanted to mention that that Victor 7 Golf, I applied with the Ministry of Communication for the Marshall Islands for one of the contests. And Mr. Tony DeBrum, he replied back and he says, yes, for this contest, for this weekend, for this time period that you have listed and this date, you can use this call sign. So I was tickled pink to be able to use that that special call sign while I was out there. So looking at some of the statistics, looking at on this chart, this covers only my Victor 73 CW call sign. As you can see, I operated from satellite to 160. On 160 meters, for example, I made 664 contacts while I was there in the time frame. And most of those were on CW, 660 contacts. And if you'll go across, you'll see my bread and butter bands. 10 meters with almost 6,500 Qs, 15 meters with 5,000, 20 meters with 5,100. So, you know, with the tri-bander, the TH7 really put it out for me and helped me quite a bit. I made 414 6-meter contacts. Most of those, surprisingly, were on a single sideband, and was able to work 198 DXCC countries. And as you can see there, 58% of my contacts were CW, 42% sideband. So again, using the V73 CW call, 28,355 Qs. And I worked some of the guys in the North Alabama DX Club, where I'm currently a president. And they were tickled when I presented this to them to see some of their calls that they had worked me. 2 stations from North America got in the log for 6 meters, K7RWT and KC7IJ, which was it was really tough because I focused a lot of time in that direction, but never really had much of an opening. On 6 meters, when I got back home, I looked at some of the cluster spots. I never did know this until I looked at the cluster spots, because the shack, the club station, even though it had internet in there, internet never worked. The mission network took over the internet at that time. Bandwidth, you have to imagine, being out in the middle of the ocean, there was not really much of a tapping into the ocean fiber. Actually, you couldn't tap into it. I believe it all was satellite stuff, and it was reserved for the mission. So we never did have any cluster spots. Never knew what was going on. So I was surprised to see S59A put this spot out. It's listen to Europe. I never did know that until I got back home. And the next slide just shows one of my last days of operation, December 2002. Still working from Kwajalein, you know, the stateside JA, up into Ukraine, Panama, Venezuela. So conclusions from my ham activity: made over 34,000 Qs from V73 using the 3 different calls in the time frame there. Participated in several contests. Somewhat, I was worried about the amplifier. One of the guys said, "Bruce, don't worry about it. You're rare DX. Your call sign equates to 1 to 2 S units." So, okay, won't worry about it then. Thousands of QSL cards from and QSOs from JA, Southeast Asia. It was not uncommon for me to get on at night on 6 meters, work Victor 85, Bravo Yankee 4, some of those exotic, to me, exotic countries over there in the Southeast Asia. I've uploaded all my logs. I was fortunate also to go to Wake Island in 2001 on a mission, and was able to make 3,000 QSOs there in one of the contests. I forget which one. And using my R7000 vertical daily, when I would come home and the kids would come home from school to eat lunch, I would talk to VK9NS, Jim Smith, who is now a Silent Key, JF2MF, MBF from Japan, and some of the other guys that, you know, you wouldn't even, I used to think were big time exotic DXers. There, you know, it's just a skip and a hop away to be able to work them. So anyway, I was glad that now when I work some of these guys in contests, they'll actually send Bruce, thank you for a contest QSO or something like that. So I got a little recognition out of that. So the bottom line, as the banner says, be creative planning your DXpeditions. You'll have a lot of fun, and you you'll never know what you can come up with by being creative. Whether it's a 10-day or a 2-week trip, or do what I did, something out of the blue, something crazy, and get a job and stay somewhere for 2 years. Anyway, that's all I have, and I'll stop sharing here.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, Bruce. Very interesting. And hopefully you heard all the applause in the room here too. Now, does anybody have any questions for Bruce on his presentation? Let's start here in the room. Okay, question, Bruce, is what were the storms like? And you mentioned that the wind was pretty severe and took a toll on the antenna equipment. And you said there weren't any hurricanes, but you must have had some weather.
We actually did have weather. I never noticed it, but we had our own meteorological lab out there, of course, due to our missions. And they told me one time that you would not believe the amount of lightning we get every night around the atoll. And so we got a lot of lightning storms, but fortunately, knock on wood, we did not take any hits directly on at the shack or at my living quarters. And we had storms come through, regular thunderstorms, but since we were riding bikes in I believe it was the springtime, we had a constant wind, and it really played on your legs. I mean, you had to have your leg muscles because the wind was so strong, and you really detected the wind blowing. But other than that, any hurricanes, never did have any hurricanes forecasted, and maybe that's just because we were lucky.
Okay, we got one more question in the room here. Okay, the question is that air travel apparently was restricted, but were visits from boats restricted? For boats from other islands or other locations, were they restricted too?
Actually, boats were too. They had security at the dock and at the airport, and when boats come in, like the Indonesian Navy came in one time, they had to make the request in advance. And at one time, there was another person that came in, and they were apparently lost at sea somehow, and they figured out that they were telling the truth, and by calling other agencies and finding out that they were lost. So they accommodated them, get them food and room, and got them back on track, a little bit later. But yeah, any boats, foreign boats, still had to have an entry exit authorization prior to coming in to Kwajalein.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Draghi. Where did the drinking water come from?
Good question. Actually, my drinking water came from a grocery store called Surfaway, but they had containment. They had in the middle of the runway, believe it or not, they had a containment. I'll call it a ditch for a lack of a better terminology, that flowed into the water facility that pumped it in a big tank, and then they would put all the chemicals in and treat it. And so it was supposed to be theoretically safe to drink and take showers. Of course, we took our showers and things like that, but we were a little bit leery of the drinking water. So a lot of people were like us and bought gallons of bottled water like you would here at a Walmart or a Dollar General just to drink from.
Okay, thank you. Question on conditions on 160 meters. Here, of course, in North America, we have a big difference in summer to winter with noise level. I was just kind of wondering what kind of seasonal variations in conditions did you see on 160, and what was the general noise level like?
There was actually quite a bit of noise there, a lot of man-made generated noise, because we had our own power station, and that generated a lot of noise for the hams at least. And for 160 meters, I can't say that I actually operated in the summertime any. It was more in the fall and the wintertime. But even in those contests that I operated in the wintertime, the pool next door, the adult pool, had their pumps going, and they had floodlights that really made it terrible for us to hear. We tried to lay out beverages to pick up stations, to receive stations, but it was horrendous. I'm lucky that we made as many contacts as we did.
Okay, and is that part of the reason why most of your contacts were CW versus sideband? I'm guessing a
Yes,
little hard to hear.
yes, because of being able to put the filters in and hear them on the CW. Of course, some of the in the sideband contests and in the modes when we operated sideband on 160, we could hear the JAs. They were fairly loud, so you could detect them. But anything far off, it was just impossible.
Okay, interesting. Sounds pretty difficult. Any more questions here in the room? Okay, Bill, you want to take over for the Zoom audience?
Yeah, I have a quick question, and we'll pass it around the room here. Bruce, what was it like for your kids for going to school? Was that the DoD schools you were talking about?
That was the DoD schools. They had an elementary school and a high school, and they had teachers, that took jobs there that worked for DoD schools. But it took a little bit of getting used to. But I think my oldest daughter was in high school, and she always did very well. And my youngest daughter always did very well. But my oldest daughter got sick while she was out there. She had actually a paralyzed colon, and we had to fly her. Actually, we flew the family home early because of that. But I will say that that daughter now has her PhD in drug counseling, and the youngest daughter that you saw there in the picture, she's working on her PhD as well in the medical field. So the schools out there weren't too, I wouldn't say they're terrible or anything like that. They were just a little bit different and getting used to.
Yeah, I actually meant more like I would assume because it'd be like military education on any kind of a a facility, but that they got along. They seemed to get along. They seemed happy in the pictures.
Oh yeah, they had the regular men and women teachers that came from schools in the stateside.
Right.
They took jobs, saw the announcements, and decided to do what I did and take a job abroad. And that's what they did. They, came out and taught for five. Some of them contractors, I believe. A lot of them stayed 5 years and or longer. DoD personnel, the limit was 5 years. Your first tour of duty was a couple of years, and then you could stay renew each year thereafter. But up to 5 years, you were supposed to fly back stateside and go back to your
Okay. What about others here on Zoom? Any questions? You're muted, don't forget. Vic?
I have two questions. What is your ham radio activity now? And what engine do you have in the Ventura?
What was that second question?
What engine do you have in the Ventura?
Oh. Okay. I'm very active now. I'm in a lot of the contests. I'm in all the major contests, and I'm quite active just about every day, trying to get my DXCC total up. trying to get everything above 300. I've got 228 on 160. Overall mixed, I've got, I think it's 349. But since the total now is what that counts is 340, I think I'm at 339. I only lack North Korea. So I'm just trying to get all my band countries filled in now. So I'm quite active. The engine in the Ventura is a 389. 389. Yep. And my dad actually bought that car in 1960 new, and he was concerned about the fuel economy, so he bought a 2-barrel, believe it or not, and a 3-speed on the column. And he actually went in there to the jet on the carburetor, soldered it up, and used a drill to drill the jet smaller. And so he was trying to save fuel. But anyway, that's a 389 with a 3-speed on the column.
More questions from the Zoom group? Dave, did I see your hand there? Or just
Bill's got his hand up. Bill.
Bill?
Yeah, I just was curious. You have to have a reason to go there. You can't just go to the island, right? I mean, and it sounded like you have to be sponsored to go there.
Yeah, that's correct. You can't just say, "Hey, I want to go to the Marshall." You can't go to Kwajalein Island and visit just like as a tourist. You can go to Majuro and do that because it's non-DOD. But because Kwajalein is DOD, you have to have a reason, and typically the reason is because you're being sponsored. You're either a family member or you're a friend, and the person that lives on Kwajalein can give you like a 7 to 10 day sponsorship, so you can come out there and do whatever you want to do. But other than that, you're either a resident or you're on temporary duty. And again, all 3 cases, you have to have that entry exit authorization that goes through Huntsville, the office at Space and Missile Defense Command, and they approve that.
It sounds like a tremendous adventure. Really neat.
Yeah.
Well, I was kind of desperate to go somewhere because the guys had talked it up, and I thought I could manage the pileups. Oh, the pileups were didn't mention that. You get the JAs in there. I mean, you can just go up 5 to 10 kilohertz, and it's just almost like music. You have to use your filters and pull them out. But I got used to the pileups, and it helps me actually when I contest here now. If you're a contester and you have a lot of people chasing you, as many of you probably detected and know, you can hear all that heterodyne coming back at you, and you just have to pull them out one by one. I'm not like the other fellow that can hear 2 calls and work the first one and go back to them. But if I know a guy, if I recognize his call sign, I'll work the one guy, and then I'll go back to one of my friends. But but it was an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Back to you, Pat.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Well, Bruce, thanks for a very interesting and informative discussion. I can tell we've had a good number of questions and I think a lot of interest. And I do appreciate you sharing your experiences with us. And I think some of those contact statistics were pretty impressive too. So if we don't have any more questions, we do have one more question. Question: is the Marshall Islands a U.S. territory?
I don't think it's a U.S. territory. We do have a compact, what do they call it? A compact free agreement. I forget exactly what they call that we pay the Marshallese Islands, their government. We pay them for the use of the military base every year. And I don't know what the number is or anything like that. Other people work that. but I don't think we are actually that they are a territory of the like Puerto Rico is. I don't think they have a vote in anything. So that's about all I know about that.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, thank you very much, Bruce. Appreciate you spending time with us. We'll be taking a break here and then moving on with our meeting. You are welcome to stay and participate in the rest of the meeting, and then there'll be some conversation on Zoom afterwards. You can leave if you've got something to do and come back at the end of the meeting and join Zoom. Or if not, we'll say 73. And thank you very much for speaking with us this evening.
All right, it's been my pleasure and good to meet all of you. And thanks for all the questions. And I'll probably break loose right now. And if I got time, I'll try to come back. But